All right, animal fans, welcome back to another episode of the Animal Pakcast. Very special guest with us today, animal athlete and top-ranked powerlifter, Andrew Herbert. Thank you for joining us today, man.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dive right in. So this is something I wanted to jump into first. Just with the times, I feel like it's relevant. And I don't know how many of our fans or, even of your fans realize how impressive you are, of course, on the platform, but also in your personal life. So you have a very, very unique role in your personal life with your job. So tell us about that, and then tell us about, maybe what type of experience you've seen going on with this pandemic in that role, because you are, as essential as it gets. You're on the front line more than anybody.
So what I do is I work for one of the extremely rare departments that combines the police and the fire department into one. My understanding is that some kind of rural places do it, but I work it's a city. So as far as I know, it's the only actual city that does it. That services many thousands of people. Technically, it's three titles. I'm also an EMT, but in most municipal areas, if you're a firefighter, you are an EMT, but it also factors into the police side as well. And so with that, every year, you're assigned to either a police or the fire division. And, if you're in the fire division, you do pretty much the same thing any other firefighter does. But on the police side, you go to fire calls, you go to medical calls, in addition to all the police stuff. So, with this whole quarantine, shelter in place thing, it's definitely been interesting being exposed, for lack of a better word, to all those different aspects. And it's unique in that, police are kind of, the first on scene for all kinds of kind of bad stuff, over history. And so there's not a lot that the police haven't seen, but this is unprecedented, and that's kind of the best word I can think of to describe it, is that, I'll have friends or even people in the public come up to me and say, hey, is this okay? Or what do I do with this? And a lot of times I'm like, I don't know. I mean, we don't, we're still figuring this out ourselves. And, even county to county, city to city, it's very different. The administration, they the higher pay grade gives kind of some of the instructions and the orders, and even to them, it's not totally clear what's done, how strict is enforcement supposed to be. I know that, we're also trying to protect ourselves.
Right.
And that's kind of one of the big worries too, is that, if one of us goes down or gets infected, we're so tight knit that it could expose a lot of people. And I've seen that happen in other departments around here. They end up having to pull dozens of people off the line, which screws everything up.
Yeah. And then you guys are way understaffed then, which is not good for anybody, not good for you guys, not good for the community.
Exactly. And it can create a downward spiral, because then you're having to call in lots of folks on overtime. And the more they work, the more likely they are.
Now the budget is screwed and all this stuff. So
exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, we're doing our best, a lot of times where we would normally just go into a place is we're trying our best to call people outside.
Right.
We're always having a mask. I mean, we always carry gloves anyway, but still all the other protective gear, like putting it on all the time.
Now you're out in California, which I think is one of the more interesting examples through this whole thing, because typically it's a very liberal spot where almost, I don't want to say anything goes, but maybe you could things are cool out there that maybe aren't cool in other states. Mm-hmm. But then through this, it seems like your governor and just the state in general has been one of the most, tightly locked up. They were talking the other day, I saw something where the city of Los Angeles itself is going to be, through August or September for the stay at home. So, what has that been like for you guys? Like, is it just bizarre to be locked in when, and you guys have such a big state. So you guys are seeing, different areas where, like you said, it might be total. I've heard that in San Diego, for example, they didn't really get touched at all, or I guess because of their precautions, they weren't as affected as some areas. What have you seen personally? Like, is your community heavily affected by this?
Well, I mean, I'll do my best not to get like political, but when you talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the liberal aspect of California, I think it's worth noting that, especially in today's manifestation of liberalism, which is quite different from the classical definition of liberalism, there's a lot of I mean, you could say hypocrisy, or it's not across the board. You know, like, so yes, marijuana's legal out here, which seems pretty liberal. Like, take San Francisco, my hometown. You know, that at the same time they banned plastic straws. You know what I mean? And so, like, but okay, plastic straws are banned, but there's syringes and human feces all over the ground, and there's not really much of a issue, addressing that issue. So, you know, there's, you know, who knows where it's at, but so I think liberalism can be pro freedom in some areas, but very non freedom oriented in other areas. Yeah, it's been interesting out here. I think we had in my county actually the first death from coronavirus, or attributed to coronavirus, way back, you know, before the shelter in place. And I remember when it first came out, that's when we started thinking, oh wow, this may actually be an issue. Like late February, I think, when it came out. So, you know, but at the same time, then it seemed like so I heard the other day that California has literally like 1/8 of the total U.S. population in it.
yeah.
You know, which is, you know, so it's huge. And so you think, you know, so our per capita infection numbers, I think, are lower than places, you know, like especially like some parts of New Jersey or New York City, but the absolute number is still ridiculously high just because we have so many freaking people. And you know, so yeah, and then there's the talk of, well, maybe we got exposed earlier to it and developed some type of herd immunity. I don't know. I mean, this thing is so. What makes this thing especially difficult is, you know, of course, on social media, people run their mouths with their opinion, and unfortunately, as with many topics, none of these people are actually experts or anywhere close to educated on the topic of viral disease management. But at the same time, how do we know anything? I mean, we're getting all our info for the most part. I mean, I get some info from other sources, but most people, it's the mainstream media. And I can tell you for a fact that I know the mainstream media is not an accurate source of information. I know for a fact that they've lied about topics, you know, pertaining to my profession. So it's a difficult thing to even form an opinion about.
Yeah, and it's tough because it seems like now it's like the mainstream media, there's like a clear line drawn in the sand, like, you know, which side of the mainstream media you're getting your information from. And, you know, on both sides, we'll say it's like you said, it's just full of misinformation. And I think at least with this situation, I don't want to get into just in, you know, generalities, but with this situation, I just think it's a big part of it is even if you go to the experts, they will be the first ones to say, we don't really know the answer on this, or what the long-term effects are, or how it really, you know, think about what we've been told from the beginning. It was like, you know, they were telling us at first, you know, please don't go out and buy masks, save them for people that are frontline workers. And then now you can't go anywhere. You can't get into, you know, pharmacy unless you're wearing a mask. So I just think it's it's strange times, man. I think this thing is so infant that we don't know really anything about it.
Completely. Well, I mean, in my mind, it brings up to two kind of major umbrella topics to mind. And one is when you're talking about, you know, the experts saying that they don't know. And whenever I hear that, I always think about, you know, Socrates, you know, had this famous line where he says, you know, the wise man knows one thing, and it's that he knows nothing. And throughout my time, you know, on this earth, consistently, you know, the smartest people I've run into are the first to admit that they don't know things, that they're uncertain. And usually the dumbest people are just 100% certain about what this, and now is just completely emblematic of that. You know, you got people who have no business even discussing, you know, a disease, claiming that they absolutely know that it's a conspiracy, or they absolutely know that it's going to kill everybody.
Right.
And it's ridiculous. But on top of that, the other thing is that really kind of bothers me is what people call the cancel culture on social media, where yes, people are disagreeing about this disease and how to manage it. That's fine and that's good. I mean, debate, educated debate, hopefully is a method for progress. However, in today's day and age, people are so quick to, as soon as someone disagrees with them about one issue, they cancel everything about that person out across the board. I've literally had people where I've kind of stood up for my profession and saying, hey, we're getting a bad rap on this and that. And people have like literally just unfriended me, unfollowed me, to say, oh, that's, he must be a bad person across the board because he disagrees with me on this one topic.
Right.
And that's the worst approach to any kind of progress.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln, one of the greatest presidents ever, one of my lifetime heroes, there's a book called Team of Rivals. And during the Civil War, when this country was close to falling apart, he brought in a cabinet of folks with different opinions who disagree. That's why they're called the Team of Rivals. But he did that on purpose to get a variety of viewpoints in order to save the country. And I wish people would kind of embrace that train of thought more.
Yeah, and especially now, it seems like, it's crazy to me that something like where we stand on a public health and safety issue has now turned into the line in the sand for which political party you stand behind, where it's like, these general things that are just, you're looking out for your neighbor is now, okay, now you must align with these 10 other thoughts. It's like, well, no, I'm an individual. I
Right.
take one thing, one example at a time, and I may have 10 different opinions on these 10 different topics. But man, we could go on about this forever. I just wanted to let you shed some light on someone that's truly on the front line through this. And one other thing, how have you been training through this, or did you get stuff for at home, or were you lucky enough to have a facility to go into? I know Boss is closed, right?
Yeah, so it got closed, which was a big shame, but we moved some of the equipment to a garage
Okay.
that in some very, very small numbers we can use. So I was making do with that. Not with the frequency that normally I would. I mean, Boss's location is actually good for me as far as where I work, so it kind of went well together. Now there's not that. I don't have stuff at home, but on this, me, like I'd say probably thousands of others, I'm very strongly contemplating trying to set up some kind of a home workout facility, because I mean, if this situation happens again, I mean,
Right.
I can't do it. Like for me, it's a little easier because I did just have surgery a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm laid up. I couldn't work out now, even if there was a gym next door. But yeah, I mean, it's like, I'm I like Elite FTS they sponsor me. I love that company, and so they top notch gear. So like I was gonna probably start really looking through. I already have looked through what they have, but everyone's kind of out of stock right now.
Yeah, it's all sold out, man. Even if you did want to go get stuff, it's
exactly. I can peruse Craigslist and eBay, and all the scammers are out too. Like you can buy a $1 dumbbell if you want, which is just,
man, some of these prices, like I see on the marketplace and stuff, I almost, it's funny. Gary Turner and I are, in a similar spot. We've, just been trying to get stuff at home or whatever the case is. And we were talking the other day, and we're like, I'm almost at the point where I want to message some of these people and just start talking shit to them and be you're never going to get this fucking price. Like,
yeah, no, it's ridiculous.
And then I've read stuff too where people, as far as scamming, like I've read stuff about, if people had, like, let's say I had a bunch of really nice equipment that I was selling, right? And, you're a scammer, but you message me like you're interested in buying it and say, okay, yeah, I'll pay that price. No problem. Cash, no problem. What's the address? And then you come to my place and rob me. I've been reading more and more about that, which is pretty scary.
Yeah. Well, and those were happening before the pandemic. I mean, I've been on calls like that where they basically it's a set up 211 or 211. Sorry, 211's a robbery. So yeah, that's yeah. And the scam goes both ways. One of my training partners was trying to get some equipment, found what seemed like a good deal, and then that person is telling them, "Oh, hey, Venmo the money to me now, and we'll arrange it." Or it's like, no. Like,
No, sir. No,
yeah.
sir. But all right. So let's move right into, some training stuff. So, like you said, you recently had surgery. What's the recovery on that for you? Like, when are you looking at being able to start working your way back? I mean, let's say you do have the ability to train as far as equipment. When are you looking to, be able to get back?
So I had the surgery 2.5 weeks ago, and prior to the surgery, I asked the doctor. I mean, asked him more about like for my job, like how soon before I can be full duty. But that's a pretty good indication of when I can train as well, just because I do have a physical job. And he said approximately 8 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so which is not bad. I mean, like my frame of I've had this is maybe the sixth like surgery where I've been put under, and each time my frame of reference is the one before that.
Right.
And one before that was when I completely
The
blew up.
tricep, right?
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
was months and months, and just so it was actually refreshing when I came out of this one and like was not completely swollen and bruised and incapacitated. I was like, wow, this ain't that bad. And so
Right.
my hope is to get back pretty soon and work my way back up. Try and be smart and not rush it. But
So then, judging, based on that time frame, if there are going to be, meets, have you kind of picked one out or anything that's got your eye?
so no, and part of that is because so the main procedure I had was carpal tunnel release. It's called on both hands. So
Okay.
both my hands, they cut some of the ligaments that go to the meat of the hands and activate it, and then to free up what's called the median nerve that activates most of the fingers. So obviously that has an impact on grip.
Right.
And I have no clue right now how that's going to translate to when I start gripping barbells.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to wait and see with that.
Yeah. You're going to have to play that by ear. That might be tough.
Exactly. Yeah. And so like, I mean, I try and like, I do have projections like way long term. Like
Sure.
absolutely hope to be lifting in the cage next year at the Arnold. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of like,
If there is a cage, we hope that there is a cage.
exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of but anything sooner than that, it's just, I'll see how things go.
Okay. Now, so this is something that you and I talked about before we started recording, and I'm kind of just going to segue right into it because you're saying that long term you do have some ideas. You want to be at the cage. We have at Animal now. We have a very interesting situation going on because we have three of our top athletes, including yourself, are all in the same weight class. So Jamal Browner just set the record for the deadlift and then total with no reps at 242.
Yep.
Dan Green, the OG, 242, and then yourself, 242. Now you have the highest wrap squat, 942, right?
Yes.
Okay. So so talk about that a little bit. I mean, we could, I say we, I mean Animal. You brought this to my attention. We could wind up having three of the all-time, the top three all-time. So that's
Absolutely.
that's some pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, I mean, I've thought about it. Obviously, I've watched kind of the rise of Jamal. And
Yeah.
it's been very fast. Like it's reminiscent of. So it's funny. The first podcast I did was about 4 years ago, when I had the world record for the total in no wraps at 242, and I was on that podcast with T Papula, who also had the all-time record at 242, and then John Rivas, who had also had the all-time record. They were trying to get Larry Wheels on, but weren't able to figure that out. And I remember in that podcast, we're talking about how the 242-pound weight class is just evolving rapidly.
Yeah.
All the names coming in, we're talking about Kevin Oak and Pete Rubish and everything like that. And I remember they also asked me like, hey, who do you think out of all of them has the biggest upside? And I said, well, without a doubt, Larry Williams. And then a couple months later, he smashes the record and had it for a long time. So, fast forward to today, Larry's bumped up a weight class. He's number 3 all time. Kevin's done some crazy stuff. He's number 2 all time. I'm number 4 all time. Jamal jumped up in there, number 1 all time. And, Dan's still in the top 10 for sure. He hasn't competed in a long time.
Yeah.
And that's those things that people got to keep in mind is, so I train with Dan. I've seen what he can do. Like, he can take that number one spot without a doubt. I believe I can. You know, I firmly believe that Jamal will up his numbers in the near future. I believe Kevin will up his numbers in the near future. So, you know, it's a bright future. It's an exciting future in the weight class.
Now, Kevin Oak, so you have the heaviest rap squat in that weight class, and then does he have, I might be mistaken, but does he have the heaviest without reps?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not even really close at this point. Like, I've watched him bump his squat up. He's always been a great squatter, but like, he did, I believe it was 860, which before that he had the record with, I think, 837. So, I mean, that's a substantial jump up. And
that's a big jump.
You could say he even had more in the tank. You know what I mean? Like, he's talked about wanting to hit 900, you know, before it's all said and done. And I think it could happen. Like, it's there, you know, and I've tried to beat his record on 2 occasions, and haven't quite gotten it. I hit it in the gym, but didn't hit on the platform, which is where it counts. And so I love it because, you know, Kevin's a friend of mine, and that's kind of that iron sharpening iron. You know, we're pushing each other, you know, like Larry and I did back in the day. Like, we both pushed each other to where we both broke the world record at the same meet, you know. It's good to have that motivation.
Now, that's a great point too, like how you're saying like iron sharpens iron, because I feel like you and Dan are a great example of that, because, you know, you guys are 2 of the best powerlifters in the world, and you both train, like you said, you train together in the same gym. Even being in the same gym, I think is something to comment on to begin with. So how big, you know, in powerlifting, how big do you feel like something like that is? Like, the environment that you train in, the training partners that you're around, how important is that for someone? Let's say for somebody that's, you know, 18, 20 years old, that's, you know, been powerlifting and they want to bring it to the next level. How important is the environment and the training partners and the people that they're around?
It's huge, and it goes both ways, in the sense that it can be a big detriment or it can be a huge advantage. And, you know, it's just funny because I was just reading on Instagram. So Josh Bryant, Jailhouse Strong, does my programming, and I love all the content that he puts out. And he just put out one about a old school bodybuilder. I mean, the guy, he fought in World War II, just to give you a sense of time, talked about him having a mentor, and talking about the commonality among a lot of the greats having a mentor figure. And that's huge. Like, and I count my blessings that I've had good mentors. You know, back when I was, you know, even before high school, lifting at the YMCA, I still remember them. There was two guy instructors and personal trainers in particular at the gym who would kind of take me under their wing, and they knew what they were doing and kind of help me out and all that. And obviously, having Dan over the last few years as my biggest mentor it's huge. So for me, it's been a positive, but at the same time, it's important to be aware of how it can be a negative. You know, where if your training partners are not pushing hard, or if they're not showing up even, or the gym environment, you know, especially nowadays, a lot of times it's more of a social hour than an actual, like, buckle down, you know, and grit, you know, just grind through it. So I think it also should be acknowledged that it's not everything. You know what I mean? Like one of my favorite powerlifters is Dennis Cornelius, you know, and he's lifting in his freaking garage. Like, he's got a toolbox right behind his squat rack. Like, and he crushes it. You know what I mean? So, like, you don't have to have the best gym and the best training partners. If it's in you, then you're going to do good. But yeah, a great environment is a huge asset. I'm very fortunate in that regard. And I encourage people to seek it out, especially you talked about the 18 to 20-year-old. That's where you're really kind of forming your technique and your mindset.
Yeah.
And if you can just find someone, even just tag along, you know, be that annoying little person on their heels, like, hey, help, you know, go for it, man. Like, I always would go up to the biggest, strongest people in the gym and just kind of pick their brain, even when I was a little kid, just because I was like, I want to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Early on, I feel like, you know, to kind of pick up on your point, like, about it being early on, I feel like that probably is even more important. Like you were saying, you know, one of your favorite powerlifters at this point now trains in a garage, but I'd be curious to see what he was doing at 18 or 20. You know what I mean? Because you could very easily at that point, you know, you're developing these motor patterns, especially for you guys, because it's so technique based and so form based that, if you develop these motor patterns and you get your body stuck in these negative patterns early on, it's, you're going to be spending time down the road then trying to fix that before you can progress even. So you'll be taking steps back before you can take steps forward. So definitely, for anybody that's younger listening, and if you're in a gym where you feel like it's lackluster or you're around people that are complacent, you got to get the hell out of there and find, like we were talking about earlier, with some of these younger kids maybe that aren't willing to go the extra mile. If that means driving an hour every day to a gym that has people that are going to push you and it's an environment where you're going to thrive in, then, if it means that much to you, you'll make it happen, basically.
Absolutely.
Now, so you were talking about Dan before. So I know Dan was working his way back from some injuries, and then he's been posting up some training at home and stuff. And I want to keep this about you too, but I'm always curious because you guys do train together and you're so close, and he's kind of a quiet, humble guy. Has he given you any type of insight as to what his goals are? Like, is he looking to come back and set that all-time mark or what? I know leading into the cage, we talked about it, and unfortunately it didn't happen, but the attempt that he was going to go for in the cage, although not a powerlifting, single, would have been fucking something to see. So.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, and I was, watching him train for that. And I think, he has an uncanny ability to grind out more reps than you would think should be able to be grinded out. Like,
no kidding, man. It looks like his eyeballs are going to pop out of his head, and then he does 6 more.
Yeah, exactly. Like they call it RPE Dan Green, or is it, and I've seen it time and time again, and so we haven't talked recently, but I mean, he's a competitive guy with, who's already done a lot, but can still do even more. And he's got to be aware of that. I mean, so I can't say 100%, but I mean, I sure as heck hope and if he doesn't, I'm going to get in his ear about it. Like, be coming to take back those records, he, before there was the Arnold. And then before that, he was getting ready for a meet. I mean, this is maybe a year ago at this point, but like his training was looking good. I mean, I was like, he was getting ready for something. I think it was like November or October, November, and he got hurt, right? Yeah, that might have been it. Yeah. Well, and then also, back in June, Sparkle, his wife, gave birth to twins.
Yes.
And she's pregnant, with a daughter right now. So, he's got his hands full, of course.
Yeah, he does. And he's got the gym and everything else. So.
Right. So I mean, families rightfully so takes priority. But I think, I don't know. I just hope he can get in there. I mean, I'd love to see. Yeah,
it'd be great to see both of you guys back full throttle again, like, pushing each other, but also, competitively coming after it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There is one more thing. I don't want to take up too much of your time. But there is one more thing. So I want to give a shout out to Connor Young. He's been with the Animal brand for a long time.
Yeah.
Always works the cage, lifts in the cage, kids and animal.
Oh, yeah.
Him and I were talking earlier, and I mentioned that you and I were going to do this podcast, and he said that he would be really interested, and he felt like the community would be interested to hear your opinion on how the culture, how powerlifting culture has kind of changed from the time that you started, and to see it kind of evolve, of course, with social media and everything, but also he was interested in the physiques because obviously, someone like Dan Green might have been one of the first people that we saw. You, Jamal, all these guys, you guys are athletes and you almost look like you could be bodybuilders, but you're as strong as the world's best powerlifters. Whereas like, when I started training with weights, there was some OG powerlifters that were in my gym, and they did not look like you guys. They were kind of, pot bellied and couldn't hear anything about doing more than 3 reps or cardio or whatever the case is. So, if you could just talk about how you've seen that shift and just the culture in general from anything that you've seen from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what's up, Connor? Guy, always putting out good content and a beast in his own right. So, I think This is kind of the second time in my life I've been involved in an athletic pursuit and watched it grow from like fairly underground to, for lack of a better term, trendy.
Yeah.
I mean, back in 2001, I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and at that time, it was, the UFC was not on Spike. No one knew what it was. It was very underground, and so the good thing about that was, so I had to actively seek it out. I mean, this is largely before internet was made. I was literally looking in the phone book to try and find Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and I found Half Gracie in my city and trained with him, and it was was mostly adult men training there, like in their 30s, because they had sought it out. There wasn't kids programs or things like that, and I was just 19, and so that's how. The funny thing, a buddy reminded me of it. My nickname back then was Monster Boy. I mean, basically because I was the youngest person there, but I was also physically like the strongest person there, and so they started calling me Monster Boy, or the Brazilians say Monster Boy, and I love that nickname, or Monster Baby.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a real good one.
Yeah. So, unfortunately now I have freaking gray in my hair and a receding hairline, so I don't know if that applies, but anyway,
Monster still, maybe not baby.
Exactly. It's actually funny. When I graduated college and came back to the academy, one of the black belt Brazilian instructors came up to me and said, "No more Monster Boy, you Monster Man." I was like, oh man, but and then it grew so much. Now there's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu programs all over the place, kids programs, stuff like that. And so the good part is that the talent pool increases. The revenue, for the athletes and instructors and academies increases. It's good, but at the same time, the hardcore aspect goes away. It gets diluted to an extent. So same with powerlifting. Like, one of my favorite all-time powerlifters is Captain Kurt Karwoski. And you can see the videos of him. I mean, the dude's hardcore. The dude's intense.
Yeah.
And there's that environment. There's the West Side Barbell environment, where they're getting into fights in the gym, and I'm not saying that's a good thing, but that's the environment. Now there's the social media. People are talking about the latest knee sleeves and the latest wraps and the filming even their warm-up sets, and it's gotten a little prettier, so to speak, which I'm not really a fan of that. But at the same time, it brings exposure to the sport, which is overall a good thing. And so I think, as far as the physique aspect, like in any sport, the kind of the big guys maybe get more credit than they deserve, in a sense. Like, when Mike Tyson was a heavyweight champion, everyone knew about Mike Tyson, but people weren't paying attention to Oscar De La Hoya as much. You know what I mean? Like, everyone says Muhammad Ali is the greatest boxer of all time. He was a heavyweight. Even he would say that Sugar Ray Robinson was actually the best of all time, but he was a smaller guy. So when we talk about the big, pot-bellied powerlifters, I think a lot of times we're thinking about the prominent heavyweights, whereas we got to remember Ed Cohn, Kurt Karwoski, Larry Pacifico. Those guys were still jacked and ripped. They just didn't get as much clout, nor did they even have the internet to really showcase themselves.
Yep.
So, but I think also on top of that, with the advances in training, in supplementation, nutrition,
just general knowledge, I think, like, just knowing what might work better, like what would be optimal. You know what I mean?
And I think the aspect of just of general health, in the sense of, it's hard if someone's gearing themselves for maximal strength. It can be hard to tell that person, hey, do some cardio, or hey, watch what you eat. Don't eat too much junk food. That could have not so much returns in the short term, but over time, if you stay healthy, presumably you're going to be able to stay active in your sport longer. Or if you are able to feel better in general, you're more likely to make it to the gym and do other things. So there's that kind of like peripheral benefit of being healthier that I think gets missed out on, because it doesn't have that immediate gratification of like, oh, I'm stronger. Oh, I put 5 more pounds on the barbell. Oh, this. And I think we're learning more about that aspect.
And you would think too, like just having way less inflammation, like walking around like, basically obese at that point, you're just, your body is a system. Nothing is in isolation. So if the system isn't running at its full capacity, like you said, it might not be 5 pounds on the bar in the next 6 weeks, but over the course of 52 weeks, it certainly might be a difference. You know what I mean? Now, is that something because as an outsider, someone that's not in the sport of powerlifting, is that something that you've seen other people shift to, like physique wise intentionally? Because it just seems like it would be like you're more efficient with your body weight then, because you guys, you have to make a weight class. And then it's also, there's a Wilks score that's determined based on what you lift versus your weight. So it's almost like at this point, I would be looking at it like, how can I be efficient with my body weight and not carrying around, a bunch of useless weight, essentially? Is that something that's talked about at all? Or?
Oh, I think it is. Yeah. I mean, my background is in wrestling, so it's the exact same mentality. It's like, how can I weigh as little as possible, essentially have as much muscle as possible and as little extra weight as possible so I can be as big and strong as possible on the mat. And it just makes logical sense. I think the only area where it can get a little tricky is with like leverages. Like powerlifting's weird in how like some people find if they have a bit of a belly, it kind of like helps their squat. They call it a power belly. And I don't really know the physics behind that, but then some people find if they get too big that it negatively impacts their deadlift. So, but a lot of people, myself included, like the heavier I get, it seems to really help the bench press. So I think everyone kind of has to try and find their sweet spot, and it's whether it's heavier, whether it's lighter. Yeah, but for everybody, just being healthier is a good thing.
So it's going to be a bad thing with that. Yeah.
Right. So, because, also as you get bigger, typically it correlates with blood pressure increase, which is bad for a ton of things. And so like I donate blood and I'll post like my my blood pressure stuff on social media. And my blood pressure has always been good. And a lot of people contact me about that. Like, hey, wow, you're 260 and you have good blood pressure. And, it's nutrition, it's supplementation, it's cardio. Genetics also plays a role.
Some of it's going to be genetics, yeah.
Yeah. Anyone who ignores the genetic factor in anything is being completely ignorant.
Yeah.
But
now, haven't you? I feel like I remember having this conversation one time when you flew out to headquarters at New Jersey. But haven't you caught some flack or people asking you about your blood pressure online because you get the nosebleed sometimes?
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. So I kind of forgot about that. Yeah, so sometimes my nose bleeds on very, very heavy squats. I think it's happened maybe 5 times in my life. So that's competition and training, which is, not often when you consider the thousands of reps I've done. And Andy Huang has had it, Eric Lillybridge. I mean, I've seen it plenty of times. And so the fact of the matter is when you're under very, 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 very heavy weight, maximally straining, everyone's blood pressure goes through the roof. By definition, you see the veins bulging out, the face turns red.
Sure.
Yes, body is adapting to the weight.
To the stress, yeah.
Right. And so in that transient moment, you may say, especially if the air is dry, you may burst a blood vessel, and it could be a capillary in your eye, which I've happen, or it can be a capillary in your nose.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it goes. It doesn't mean that you chronically have high blood.
Right, it's temporary. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
But all right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I don't want to take too much time. We try to keep these pretty brief because I know everybody's got a lot going on. Maybe not right now following the surgery. But
I have a lot going on, man.
But I really appreciate you taking the time for this, and best of luck with the recovery. And we're looking to see you and Dan both on the platform coming soon. So thanks again, and take care, man. And to all you Animal fans, take care.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.